Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Searchcast. Today with me is my friend Chris Reid, the co-founder and owner of Stretch Creative, a former a veteran, a submariner, and a current Canadian. Chris, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Appreciate you having me.
All right, so the first question I ask all the guests is, you could choose any TV character, movie character, book character, who would make a great content creator or a terrible content creator, and why?
The first person that comes to mind, and just because I'm like a huge fan of this show, is The Office. I think Jim would be a great content creator, mostly because of how he messed with Dwight, and he created these different ways to like mess with him and essentially creating different stories. And I think content is really about storytelling. Um, if I were to stay in that same vein, because I watch a lot of this show, I would probably say someone who'd be a bad content creator would likely be Michael Scott. And why I say that is, well, maybe it's bad and good. I think Michael Scott would be very well because he would find his people, but he would also offend enough that would create enough engagement to create comments to spark. So I think that's where I would fit those two in the bucket. So
I can tell we grew up around the same time period because everybody in our demographic chooses The Office and the characters. So you're on
yeah.
point there. That's so
You
funny.
want to know a fun fact though is I didn't start watching The Office until 2 years ago. I'd never seen it.
Oh,
And
really?
my wife's like, you need to watch this. And I finally watched it and I was so sad on that last episode because it was over.
Yeah.
It was like you learn to grow with these people. And it's also something you can kind of relate to. Like they're obviously very much extreme characters, but if you've worked in an office setting in life, you can kind of go like, oh yeah, that kind of reminds me of that person I worked with at that office, so you kind of, anyways, I love the
Well,
show. It's a fun show.
you're a content extraordinaire. So I think we can both agree they did a great job at persona building. Like
100%.
what the accountants are
And it
like.
also showed too, I think, with the show is that like the first couple seasons weren't backed by millions and millions of dollars. Like it was a
Yeah.
pretty low budget show. And what it showed is that the quality of the actual content itself outperformed the production. And I think in the world of content, that often gets flip flopped where it's like we gotta spend so much to make it look shiny and pretty, but
Hmm.
really it's the messaging and how we present it is what truly resonates. And I think The Office did that a very well, very good manner.
I totally agree. I mean, even the characters. Pam. She was on a podcast and she was kind of. I'm gonna, Jenna Fisher, but Pam. She was like, I literally stole the nameplate off my door because I thought we weren't gonna make it past the pilot. Like who would watch it?
Totally.
And now it's like, I think they're gonna reboot or they're talking about it. I'm not sure if that's fake news or not, but I hope
I
so.
heard it was a reboot that's going to be in the same universe, but with a failing newspaper company. So like kind of the same thing, failing paper company and how they're, which is it'd be interesting because the time we're in now, I think with them, where obviously digital became a thing, now newspapers are getting hit pretty hard,
Yep.
and publishers are having to reinvent themselves. So I'm excited, but I don't want to put it to a pedestal of like, am I expecting that same office? Like every episode laughing, these little insights. So I'm hopeful. That's what I'm staying with is hopeful.
Yeah,
So
reboots are tough. Like even Dexter was a great show. Then the reboot was a little disappointing on how that one did. But now they're bringing it back again. So who knows, man?
you know,
It's funny how
and this
history.
is the thing I realized in this. I was talking to my wife this other night because we watch a lot of TV at the end of the day. It's kind of how we like decompress from work. And we're like, what happened in the last 20 years of did people like just lose the ability to create new concepts? Because like it feels like in the last 15 to 20 years, it's just all these reboots, right? And it kind of showed back in the 80s and 90s. Again, it wasn't like huge production values. It was like they really had to hone in on the story. Um, anyways, it's just interesting, and I'm hoping that this new generation can spark some new storytelling because I'm not that I'm against reboots, but I'm kind of some of them aren't injustice.
Totally agree. I had this conversation with some of my friends too, and it seems like, you know, kind of our demographic, millennials, now we have like a bigger piece of the economy. So like, the nostalgia definitely hits us, right? Like Pokemon is still a thing. It's making the comeback, and Nickelback is back, or Creed's back on tour, and
Totally.
Blink 92 is back together. It's like all of our childhood. It's like go back to a happier time. Let's
Yeah,
revisit
yeah.
that.
Back when life was a whole different world, whole
Exactly.
different world, you know?
So, you were a veteran. You spent many years under the ocean exploring. How did you get into the world of digital marketing?
It's a really weird story. It wasn't even really planned. So I spent 4 years in the Navy. Before that, I went to school. My family is a family of like generational bankers. And so I did what maybe a lot of youth do is like, what am I going to do with my life? Well, my parents do this. Maybe that's what I'm destined for. Went to school, did finance, got accredited for, selling stocks and bonds and all that stuff. Got into it as an apprentice. And within like the first 6 months, I hated it. And I remember actually crying, calling my dad, going, why did I do this? And he's like, dude, I told you, don't get into banking. Like they both did. Don't do it, man. And then not that I was going against it, but it was something for me. I was like, it didn't feel good. So I guess I was about 24 and I was like, okay, shoot, like I don't have a plan now. And so I did, I guess what the next best idea was join the military because I needed to do something and figure it out. And joined as an electrician because I figured I'd get a trade. Did 4 years in the military and realized that the military wasn't something that like really challenged me in the fact that you're very much in a box, right? And I think for me, as I learned, is I like to think outside the box, look for solutions, look for creative challenges. So when I met my wife, I was in the military. She said, "Hey, you know what? I don't want to marry a military person. That's just something I don't want to do. I want to be with my partner more than 3 months of the year." And I say, "Hey, I'm okay with that." So after my 4 year contract, I got actually into the world of headhunting and recruiting. It was a fully commissioned role. Pretty scared coming out of the military, no salary. Realized that was hard, but I learned a lot in terms of like how to prospect and how to do things like that. So I got a job, fast forward to a tech company here in Victoria, BC, where I'm located. And they had a platform that basically was similar to like an Upwork, where they basically have a platform with freelancers and then clients. Spent 4 years there just basically learning what all of this is. I joined the sales team and really understood like what clients were looking for. And so I spent 4.5 years there. Then I ended up moving to a stock photo agency called Stocksy, which was started by the gentleman who started iStock.
Sure.
They were a cooperative, which was an interesting model that I learned from in that a lot of the platform world, there was an emphasis on clients about like clients only matter. And not that the freelancers didn't matter, but there was such a heavy reliance on that. Stocksy flipped that where they're like, hey, we're going to put all our focus on the creators. And if we do that and we pay them well, the clients are going to be happy because they're going to get a good output. And so I learned a lot there, and then joined a tech startup with a team out of Portland, Oregon. And they were a SaaS product that helped uh, clients like Adidas and Reebok basically produce product content at scale. And so the CEO, who's still a good friend of mine, him and I were on the road for probably about a year, going to different places to pitch. And I learned a lot from him. And so I realized I wanted to do my own thing and taking my experience from the military of like organizational to recruiting, because in the world of agency, you have to work with a lot of great creatives, and then the platform, and then Stocksy, and then Talku. Um, all of a sudden, I just like, I'm just gonna do my own thing. I think that I can bring a lot of value in what I've learned. And I started the company when I was still at Talku, and that was during 2020. And so obviously we all know what happened in 2020.
Pandemic.
Everything slowed down, right? And so no one was buying software, but I was getting people who were wanting content. So as the company I was working for was struggling, just kind of making it through like every other software company during that time, the agency was blowing up. So I got laid off, and it was a blessing because I basically had my employer rip the band-aid off and say, no, without them knowing, go and do this. And we haven't looked back.
No, I think that's so cool, and I've had a lot of cool guests on the show, and it's so interesting that digital marketing, people find it in so many different ways, but there's so many different life skills that you get throughout your career that translate well to digital marketing. So, like you said, military, organizational, recruiting, and the sales, how to talk to people and how to find the value of what they're looking for, make yourself available, and then you being on the road for a year, just showing that like that grind mindset, right? So that's super cool. So you started Stretch in 2020 during the pandemic. Not the ideal time
Yeah.
to start a business, but
No, February 1st is when I incorporated. So right before the world shut down.
yeah.
And I thought, well, this is not the greatest, but you know what? It was, I think what we learned in 2020 in the world of digital is like the importance of digital. I think a lot of companies knew the importance, excuse me, but I think the pandemic really showed you have to move forward. You have to adapt or else, you're going to get shut down essentially.
So since 2020, if we focus on digital marketing and not even the crazy hectic events of the world, a lot has shifted there too, right? You came in, about 2 weeks before the pandemic started, and then you fast forward a year, ChatGPT took the world by storm. I mean, ChatGPT's been around for years, but it wasn't really until 2021, late 2021, that we're really started to boom. So you've gone through a volatile time in the world of digital marketing. Let's talk about that a little bit. How has, if anything, how has it changed that you owning a content marketing agency to the world of AI from when you first started pre AI, let's call it, because
Yeah.
people did use it, but it wasn't at the same scale that they are now versus today in 2024.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll be completely honest. When I think it was 3.5 came out, when people were like, oh my God, you can write a poem or write a song or even quote unquote write an article. Um, I lost a lot of sleep, right? That was like, oh my God, is this it?
A lot of
So
marketers felt like that, by the way.
yeah, right. Like it's just like, holy crap, like this is crazy cool, but crazy scary. And my wife, who's also a partner, she leads all of our people side of the business and kind of the operations. She's always been my rock going like, hey, chill. Like the world's not ending. We don't have to like freak out. And then speaking with others, like my former CEO at the tech company, who's been a mentor of mine for a few years now, because he's obviously been in this space. And he said something to me that I often think back to is that when the back in the day when farmers were farming, they used to use their hands and they use hand tools. And eventually the tractor came in, and a lot of farmers were scared of their career, right? But what they realized is that having a tractor could help them produce more without like breaking their back. And so I've tried to really lean into AI as like, hey, this isn't yet a replacement of human beings, but it's a way to go, how do I do the current work I'm doing in a more efficient manner? And so we've been leaning heavily into AI, and that's not necessarily on the output of what we're doing, but more so of content isn't something about just write this and you get this beautiful article. There's these components that go into briefing and researching and structuring that are helping us expedite that process, which is making things a lot easier and in some ways cost effective for our clients because we don't have to factor in that extra time that used to have to be taken to get them the output that they're wanting.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. I think again, I'll echo the sentiment. You definitely want to learn. A lot of SEOs, a lot of paid search people, a lot of social media people were, like, oh my god, this really is happening way sooner than we thought. We're coming for our jobs. But I think you hit the nail on the head. It is about efficiency, and it's how you leverage things, really. I think it got a lot less scary. It got very scary in November of 2022 when Google all of a sudden softened their stance on AI content. For many years, they were like, it's spam, it's unhelpful, we're going to count it against you, paraphrasing. And then, everyone was like, oh my God, search engine land and SEJ were just crazy about, oh my God, you can use AI content, blah, blah, blah. I think I was still a little bit skeptical, just because I've been doing this for a while, and I always kind of tell everybody, my team, my clients, do what Google, invest in what Google does, not what Google says, right? And then
Mm,
1 month later, December of 2022, they rolled out Experience as part of EAT, and that basically just you know eliminated artificial intelligent created content because they're not good at showing experience. So I experienced that with you, different place, but we're going through the same journey as was a lot
yeah.
of other digital marketing people. So how do you make AI content, or how do you use AI to make your work streams more efficient? And actually, I guess before we talk about that, maybe you should give an intro on what Stretch Creative is.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So essentially, we started off as a writing studio. Um, as we've evolved, we become more of a, we call like a content studio. an agency. So working and partnering with clients to essentially augment the production of content. So we partner with a lot of SEO managers, SEO strategists, and often they're looking for how do we get the output to support the strategy that we're developing. So we've kind of fit in a pretty nice spot there, working with probably more of the medium-sized to enterprise-sized businesses that are trying to do this at scale in an organized manner that's not going to put them in revision hell, which is a big challenge to scale SEO content programs is getting everything consistent. So that's who we are. And with that, we've leaned into over the years now design, video production, because SEO is not just words anymore. It's about engagement, right? And keeping people on screen and giving them the information and the answers they're looking for. So that's kind of where we've evolved and where we are currently. Ask me the other question again, because it popped
Yeah, so
my.
like, you mentioned, you have to you can't run from AI. You need to leverage it just like a
Correct.
farmer would. So what are some tips or tricks you have to like leverage AI in terms of efficiency for creating content?
Yeah. So one of the areas that I really like right now with AI that's been not only efficient, but just like helpful is obviously we know that Google, you mentioned that experience, right? With the EEAT. A lot of the things that we're doing with clients right now is interviewing subject matter experts internally that they have, or leveraging external SMEs to help bring value and insights to content that you're not just going to find through a Google search when you're going to write an article. But through those interviews, a lot of stuff that we take is taking the transcript, right? And so asking a ton of questions, getting all these information, and how do we chop that information up now? Whether it's with injected quotes, supporting new article ideas, we can get a lot from just having it analyzed and providing just opportunities. So that's a big area that I really like right now. The other area that we're working with is just like briefing, right? And so just how do we brief in something in a more efficient manner, but also even providing outlines to the team so that the first person in line isn't necessarily starting from the start line. They've kind of had a push, and now they're in kilometer 5 of the marathon of that piece of article, right? So they're already kind of moving. So
Do you think, and there's no right or wrong answer here, but if you were a new writer coming into the world of digital, you had no experience creating like, let's say SEO type of content, but you were a really good writer at university or college, or you just enjoyed it, writing on your own time. Do you think you're at an advantage or disadvantage in the world of AI being so prevalent and easy to use versus someone that didn't have it about 10 years ago?
that's a really good question, Shane. I would say you're probably at an advantage, right? I think there's a lot of people scared right now, which they should be because AI is scary, but also exciting. I think the new folks coming in, and that's like that Gen Z generation, it isn't scary to them. This is life. It's kind of like when we were younger and we're like, oh my God, the internet is so freaking cool, man. Like you can,
Yeah.
but it scared the boomers. I think if you take the emotional component out of AI and you look at it from a pure like tool perspective, I think the younger generation has the head leg up on that because of just their ability to adapt to stuff because it's still part of their 25 and under brain that's still developing, right? I think for a young writer coming in though, it's going, how do I use this to create something that is going to provide the utmost value to the reader, right? I think that's what's going to make a good writer's good in the future. It isn't necessarily looking at the old SEO of how do I optimize this to the gills, but how do we create content that's answering a question, but also leading to some level of conversion, right? Like I think SEO isn't just about traffic anymore. It's about, how do we also convert them, and using that content. So I think if I was a young writer coming up, I would heavily lean into it, not to write, but to help me organize.
Sure.
And I would figure out ways to continue to look at how do I position content to be as helpful and authoritative as possible. And that comes through experience. And so networking and being able to go out and talk to people and interview folks, you almost become a semi-journalist now, I think, in the world of SEO content.
Yeah, I could see that going either way. You definitely make a strong case for it being an advantage. I mean, if you just grow up with it, that's all you know, then, there's nothing scary about it. Totally understand that perspective. I think it'll be interesting to see how it plays out over time. On the flip side, I can see it being a disadvantage because they didn't have to do research the same way that
Mm,
someone that didn't have ChatGPT did. But the real connection is going to be how audience perceives the content, whether however it was created. So, I call them normies, my friends that don't do digital marketing or SEO. A lot of them have switched to ChatGPT or Perplexity rather than Google. They think that it's
yeah,
just easier and they're learning stuff, like instructional, even over YouTube. They'll go to ChatGPT, look for instructions. So, super interesting, right? Most of the world can't delineate between AI versus human generated content. It's really we're at the hands of the search engine whether they're going to index it and rank it. But a normal person,
yeah,
give them human generated versus AI. A normal person is probably not going to be able to tell. I think we're a little bit biased because we read it every day so much. We're like, okay, this is clearly AI. There's listicles coming out of nowhere, right? And like,
totally.
there's always a conclusion or a summary or a furthermore type of
Or in the
paragraph.
world of the digital landscape or something like that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, totally.
But I agree. I agree. There is the one thing I guess I fear in the world of content because one of the reasons I truly started Stretch is I believe in storytelling. We've been doing storytelling for thousands of years. This is how I think storytelling is the bridge to connect information to human to human. What I worry is that if we rely too heavily on AI and not bring human touch in, we're losing authentic stories that connect us to anything. And what I see on TikTok and different things is there's a lot of like how to get rich quick by using AI. And I think there's this thing of like, take out this person, just slam out AI content. It's going to get you a lot of great results and make you rich quick. Um, that's a fear I have because I don't want to see a world where we have such generic content. And if AI is just learning off AI, like what is that going to do? And so I think if you lean into that human element, you're going to win. Like you're going to win because there's not those other people who are doing that legwork. They're stopping at that 5K versus finishing the marathon, you know?
I think that's spot on. And I tell a lot of clients this that everybody wants the bottom of the funnel, the highly transactional stuff, the most expensive keywords on paid search, the near me's, the emergency type services, the coupons, discounts. Everybody wants those, but there's only so many ways you can write that service page or that product page. Doesn't matter if it's AI, human. There's only so many ways you can talk about any service, dental, lawyers, plumbing. It doesn't really matter.
Totally.
So to win an SEO in 2024, my advice would be to storytell. You have to answer the whole user search journey from top of the funnel, mid to lower. Then you need to interlink them together. So a lot of people do a good job when I audit sites of linking from the blog to a service page. A lot of people do that well. What a lot of people don't do well is link blogs together, right? So I would
Mm-hmm.
recommend putting everything into a primary category and a secondary category that establishes your linking targets, your internal linking targets, and all of those should be linked to the service page. And if you do that, if someone's asking like, what is my tooth hurt, right? And then it's something about root canals. Well, how many other ways are people searching that? You should have different blogs that talk about those different areas, and you're leading that user through a story, right? Like, oh, okay, yeah, that is yeah, it's definitely not a chip tooth that I can look in the mirror, I can see. It's an internal pain. Like, what is this? Oh, it could be a root canal. And they're asking like, what is a root canal? How do I fix it? Is there at home remedies? Do I have to go to a dentist? How much is this going to cost me? All those different kinds of things, recovery times, etc. So if you can do a great job of storytelling, no matter what the industry is, you can link them all together. You build those different layers and layers and layers of content to be sure that you are a topic authority in that area. That's how you win, right? There's locality and stuff involved, but I think you're spot on. Storytelling is definitely the goal, and if you're not a good storyteller with your content, you're not going to do well in 2024 when it comes to SEO. Anything else you'd add to that?
I would add, again, a lot of companies have experts. Like typically you start a company because you're an expert in something and you're looking to provide that service. I think there's a huge opportunity for people to leverage these experts they have internally, whether it's a tech, whether it's a finance company. Like these are the people who know, but you go to these sites, these professional services, and you don't get any of that from it. You don't really see who is the expert. And so I think using storytelling is a great opportunity within the business that you have, right? And I think we as consumers don't want to be fed BS anymore, right? Like we want to be fed something that we understand who we're going to work with, who we're going to buy from, and we respect them as a business, right? There's so many more elements into the buying process these days, and I think through storytelling you can learn those without just putting up your values on your site of integrity or whatever buzzword they use. You can show that through the storytelling, which again creates a more subconscious connection to the company, at least from my perspective and how I view businesses.
Yeah, I think a lot of marketers need to take a step back and take off their marketing hat and just be a normal consumer. What are you expecting when you go and search something? What do you expect to see on that page? So one thing I see missed a lot is, people looking for coupons or discounts, and then they land on like a product page or a service page, but it's all the way at the bottom. If you go in a Google Search Console and you see that X page, is getting a bunch of impressions, not a lot of clicks for coupons or discounts or promos, put those up above the fold. That's what people are there for, right?
Mm,
Answer the search intent. That naturally will just build trust on your site. You are the expert. That's what they want. That's what they're there for. So I think a lot of people they get so eager to create a new page, a new page, a new page. There's so many little things you can do. That's not even adding new content. That's take another module from the bottom of the page, putting it a little bit higher, right? So I think that's gets so often overlooked, but it can make such a big difference in your conversion rate. So to your point earlier, SEO has evolved. It's not just about traffic. If you're not contributing to revenue, you're going to get crossed out in for the next season when it comes to budgets, right? Companies, the CEO looks at every marketing channel as a simple spreadsheet. What is the ROI on this channel, right? Like
yep.
if you're an SEO
Yep.
person and you're just a dash because it's like, well, it's hard to track. But we have traffic. That means very little to them, right? So you're putting yourself at risk. So you got to know your numbers.
Yeah. Traffic doesn't pay the bills, right? Like
That's
we
exactly
need,
it.
and I think companies need to look at the type of business they are. One of the things I heard at one point is if we look at companies like Amazon and Walmart, we don't shop at Amazon and Walmart because we believe in their brand story and we believe in who they are as a brand. We go there because it's the cheapest, or like Amazon used to be, at least before all this like third party selling. But like we went there because it was cheap or quick and fast. And then you go to like, if you're a specialty store, unless you are showing your difference through storytelling, what makes you different? Why would people want to buy from you, right? A lot of specialty things, especially when you niche down, like I'll take like running as an example. If I'm an avid runner, I'm not going to Amazon to buy that stuff. I would rather go to Hoka's site because they're showing me why this shoe is the right fit or helping me discover why this particular product based on how I am. And so it's like when you walk into Walmart, again, this is not knocking Walmart, but if you walk into the store, like the associates aren't like, hey, how can I help you? How can I find the right product? They're there to stock cheap products to get them off the shelves. You walk into a specialty running store, brick and mortar, you're met with someone who's like, hey, what are you looking for? Tell me what the type of writing you do.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what kind of arch do you have in your foot? Let's measure that. Like they're showing why you're paying more because they're providing that extra value and expertise. And so if we look at that simple model when we're online is what type of business are you? Are you cheap, fast, and quick? Or are you a product that is more expensive, but for a reason? And do consumers know that reason? Right. And so I think that's lost in oftentimes because content becomes this afterthought. I think SEO becomes this when the economy's down. People are like, oh, we'll go to paid because paid's the quicker path to get those quicker wins. But it's investing into how you're presenting that and aligning that also with paid too. That content should also help that. So, anyways, long rant, but I think companies need to step back as marketers and go, what type of company we are. And if it's the brand of expertise, then you got to show that. And the only way you're going to show that is through content. So,
No, I totally agree. And I mean, if I think about my own like Instagram algorithm and the stuff that I get targeted by for sponsored, it's like, I recently got into like CrossFit, and then so it's like I'm trying to change like the way I eat and the way I sleep and all that stuff. And it's like you click on one thing that's like about seed oils, and all of a sudden you get like all these different things, and the ads are specifically targeting towards that persona of like no seed oils, right? It's like beef tallow
right.
and all this stuff. But it's really great marketing, right? Because they just hone in on that one niche, and that is like the specialty. That is, you could, without even clicking on the ad, I can see what their brand story is, right?
Yep.
Whether it's talking about inflammation or what canola oil is or all that stuff, is super fascinating. So yeah, you're right. You're spot on. Brick and mortar is still. I still prefer to shop small business whenever I can. But yeah, the brick and mortar, they can charge a little more because you're buying from an expert, right? That's the expertise that you're getting. How can you do that online? I think answering search intent is super important. I know you said earlier you expanded from just kind of content to more multimedia, design, video, etc. Let's talk about that a little bit. What caused the need for you to have to, expand your tool set?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big need came from some of the SEO updates, just with like multimedia being an important piece, like for just like on-site time. I also think, even touching a little bit on your previous point of having very specific queries, like that root canal one, right? And so content, I think a lot of times we've been in this world where people are like, okay, we need like 4,000 words and something really deep. And I think consumers are so used to just flicking, within seconds. And so the time that people are committing to certain pieces of content are more minimal and minimal. And so video became something that is obviously blowing up just with TikTok and Reels and all this stuff and how consumers are engaging with content. But it was more so like just how do we tell different stories, right? And not every story, some stories need more effort through video, or they need more effort to kind of show how their software works. We just did this pretty cool animation project with their AI company that helps insurance companies figure out how to help them quote in certain things based on where they live and all this stuff. But we were able to kind of like open up this house and show how it all works. And you can visually tell stuff better through video than versus some topics. And so we just kind of leaned into that. We brought on a creative director. He's 30 years experience from like TV, film, advertising. And it's been interesting to have him come on board because it's changed so much too. Like just the way you'd have to go and produce something. It doesn't take a month now to produce a small
Sure.
clip. We can kind of amplify that. So that's been something that has been a big game changer, just to kind of bring in that multimedia. But really the main reason is just consumers' attention spans are just shorter and shorter. And how do you give them, I like to call snackable content, right? They're not here for a meal often. They're here to like grab a snack and keep moving. How
Sure.
do you get more snacks than, 5-star meals? So
Yeah, and I think it goes down to answering search intent again. So another example I would give is if you're describing, what are the most common types of clouds, and you have 4,000 words of really good content, but at the gist of it, it's like, well, you can see it in the sky, it's white, it's puffy. That's like every cloud, right?
yeah.
But if you have visuals that identify them, that's what people are actually looking for, right? So it's interesting when you audit a website, people are like, "Well, this used to be number one for everything." You look at the content, yeah, this is really good content. It's got a lot of links, like then you look at what the competitor, who's number one now, who's number two now, who's number three now. It's like, well, look, they have hundreds of pictures on their sites, like it's describing the different formations, how they form. They got diagrams. That's why you're not winning anymore, right? And then you add those visuals, you make the visuals even more helpful, and then it's like all of a sudden, boom, Google's like, yeah, you're back to number one. So answering search intent is so important. The algorithm is always changing. To your point, video goes back to what I said earlier. Invest in what Google's investing in. Google obviously bought YouTube. So if you think that YouTube's not going to be a major factor, I got a bridge to sell you. It's
Well, it's what the second biggest search engine, right behind Google
yeah.
itself, is YouTube.
I think TikTok is creeping its way up there.
Yeah, well, that's the other one too. Like it's when I have to do something. We have a small acreage. We live in the trees, and I've had to learn how to like live in the trees because I've never lived in a property like this. And I YouTube everything because I'm trying to figure out how to do certain things. Okay, how do I start a chainsaw? How do I change the chain off of a chainsaw? Like I wasn't ever taught this.
Yeah.
And so YouTube helps. And when you go there, they give you the answer. Like,
Oh yeah.
and it's usually in a 3 or 4 minute clip, right? And you're like, great, I can now move on and do what I'm doing. And so I think that's how we have to kind of almost think about even just written content on our article is they're just looking for the answer. How do you provide it? Cut out the fluff. the same way you look for something on YouTube is just I need the answer to do or find the problem that I'm trying to figure out. And I think we lose that sometimes in content. We want to get too romantic or too just kind of, it's like when what drives me nuts, and I hope the world of SEO changes, and I'm going to derail a bit here, but it's just like the recipe example.
I was gonna say that.
It's just like I just need a recipe for this. And I don't necessarily like the storytelling's fine, but they put it at the very bottom, and I don't even get to the recipe half the time because it's either littered with unnecessary text and a million pop-ups, right?
Yeah.
Um,
I'm trying to figure out how long I need to air fry these baby potatoes. I don't need to know how baby potatoes were invented, who named them. I don't need to know about the 7 different types of air fryers that are best for this. Just like, is it 365 for 15 minutes or is it 400 for 20? That's all I need to know.
yeah,
But yeah,
100%. I
recipes.
learned that the hard way because I kind of faked my way onto a baking show on the Food Network a few years ago. My wife asked me, or I always told her that we watched this kids Food Network show about like how they baked, and I was like, how hard could it be to bake? They're like 12. Like they haven't even hit puberty yet, and they're baking these beautiful things. It can't be that hard. So she sent me this link to apply and she said, put your money where your mouth is. And I applied and I kind of maybe exaggerated a bit of my skill set because I wasn't a baker. Anyways, I had when they cast me for the show, they said, you're flying to Toronto in 5 weeks. And I was just like, oh shit, like now I actually have to figure this out. So I had to teach myself how to bake. And I did it every day on YouTube. I would do something different. And I just got to like this. I started following a lot of channels because they were giving me the answer of what I needed.
Sure.
With still some story included, but it wasn't like unnecessary story and then the answer. It was story with the answer. And you're like, oh, okay, like I like you. You got what I
Yeah.
needed and I can move on. And I'm going to follow you now because you gave me what you needed, right?
Does your wife secretly just have a massive sweet tooth and she just wanted desserts for 6 weeks?
Well, here's the crappy part is that she's gluten free. And so she couldn't eat any of the stuff I was baking. So everything I baked, I would try to do a gluten free version. And it didn't work out very well. She was very nice and smiled and slowly choked it down and went, but it wasn't anywhere near. But I did end up finishing second place on that show and almost won it. And again, it just kind of showed up like you just got to try something.
What show is it?
And
I want to follow. I want to watch this now.
it's called Wall of Bakers. And so it wasn't even like one of those. I should have been on something like Nailed It, like on Netflix, where it's like you make
Yeah.
something gross and but this was like they had 9 Food Network judges who just sit and watch you the whole time. You have 30 or 40 minutes to bake something. Um, but it was a
What did you
crazy
make?
experience. So on the show, you had to like apply to like you told them like what everyone knows you for, but like no one knows my baking because I had never baked before. So I kind of just figured like what would I want to make over and over again to teach myself, and I made this like Reese's peanut butter cup cookie, but in a muffin tin. So it was like this real thick cookie.
Yeah.
And I called it the Ruby because my dog was sitting there. I have a Rottweiler named Ruby and it kind of looked like the same colors. And I was like, well, I need a story because again,
Yeah.
story is what connects. So I named it the Ruby after my dog because most people like dogs. Anyway, so I sold them in on that. But then the next round, they give you 2 recipes or 2 ingredients, sorry, and you have to figure out what to bake. And so the first round, I knew exactly what I was making. I made it like 100 times over and over again. And my neighbors loved me because I kept feeding them baked goods every day for 5 weeks. But the second round, I was like, if I get to the second round, I got to figure out because I'm just winging this now. And they gave us rosemary and apple butter, and I'd never used any of it. I made this like apple turnover with like rosemary ice cream because I got to use
Oh,
the
cool.
liquid nitrogen,
Yeah.
and they do on baking shows. I said, if I ever go on a show, I'm using liquid nitrogen because that looks really cool. You put the
Yeah.
glasses on. It's like a science project. Um, got through that round, got to the final round, and I was trying to make a cake, and I forgot to put flour in it. So it was like this soupy mess, and there's like 5 minutes left in the round. So I had to like adapt, and I made this like chocolate pudding thing, and I had to like respin it and sell it to these judges. But unfortunately, that wasn't good enough to win the final round. But it was a wild experience, and you learn like, hey, they created 30 or 60 minutes of content on TV, and that was my first insight to like how long it takes to produce 60 minutes of, or I guess 45 with commercial breaks. But 45 minutes, we were in the studio for 23 hours that day.
Oh my god.
And I was like, holy shit, like it shows that like there's so much work that goes into a piece of content. And what we're even talking about today is like even just with AI, like you could create an AI show, but you're losing all these like human elements, like people,
Totally.
and so anyways, it just kind of shows of like the investment that should go into something to create something beautiful. And I was like, holy, that blew my mind away with TV of like,
So
I don't
it's
know
a
how
full
these,
day, 24 hours. They give you like a nap break or like,
no. And I flew in, it was in Toronto. So it was Food Network Canada and I'm in BC. So I had to fly 6 hours east. My bags got lost, didn't get to the hotel until 1 a.m. and I had to be in the hotel lobby by 4 a.m. So I had no sleep. Um, and it was just like Red Bulls. But you have massive breaks, like they're just, and it was during COVID, so we had to stay in this little room, like after COVID, so we still had to wear masks, and
yeah,
it was a long day. But
that's
and
great story. The rest of your
I
life, you
might
know?
have, yeah. I mean, it was something that like I always wanted to try. I'm always been a believer of like, you just have to try something. That's always the hardest part in life is just saying I'm going to try it and do it.
Sure.
Doesn't mean you have to do it forever. But if you try, you can learn and you can adapt. And that's, I think, a great lesson in anything you do in life is just you have to try a few times to fail and figure out what doesn't work to figure out what does work. And we can use that in the world of content. We can use that with our marriage. We can use that with whatever, right? It's you have to try to do in order to learn what to keep doing.
Shout out to Bear Grylls. Improvise, adapt, overcome.
100%. 100%. I'm not quite ready to do like a survival show. I do like Naked and Afraid. And my wife always says why. And I think it's because maybe I enjoy seeing other people in all this pain and it makes my feel my current situation not quite as heavy. Uh, but one day, the goal is me and my son watch Survivor. We're big Survivor fans. The goal is to get on Survivor one day.
That'd be cool.
Now that they let Canadians apply a few years
I'd
ago.
rather
So
do Amazing Race, you know, but Survivor would be interesting. I think that's more mental than physical. A lot of those
yeah,
things, you know, especially Naked and Afraid. You know, like I get bit by mosquitoes and bugs all the time. So like when I'm fully clothed, I can't imagine like how itchy I would be. That'd be tough.
that's the one thing on that show is like I wouldn't be afraid necessarily so much of like the big prey, like I would be, but what would probably drive me out of that competition quicker is the bug bites. Like I couldn't do it. I couldn't
Yeah.
do it. Like I get eaten alive. They love my body, and I think if I was out there, I'd be one big welt. It wouldn't even be bites. It'd be just my whole body is like turned into one big bite.
And you don't have a cell phone. You're not googling like what kind of bite is this? Should I be worried? I need to
Totally.
make
Yeah,
this
exactly.
video search. Like you're just like,
Totally. Yeah. My hand's turning purple. What should I do? No, no, no way to figure that out there. So
nope. You gotta trust the medical staff. It may or may not be licensed or not.
100%.
Chris, as we wrap this up, any predictions for the world of content to round out the year?
Well, I think the world of content is, we're in a down economy for many industries. I think content needs to be very specific and focused to like what are the goals of the business. And I think bringing forward more internal expertise into what we do with content. I think learning AI and how to leverage it to create more efficiency. But I'm interested, what I'm really curious, and I'm not sure, and this is what's difficult to predict, is in the world of SEO content specifically, is what happens next? How do we start optimizing for search GPT? Because I heard that's coming out, right? Like, how do we evolve into that, and how do we start to create content that's coming? Because, like you said earlier, is a lot of people now aren't Googling. They're going to ChatGPT and they're going to other things of tell me the answer. So I'd be curious to see how that goes. And I guess if we're going to kind of predict is, or like, how do we set ourselves up for success going into 2025? I think it's regardless of the size of industry or business you're in, you have to almost go, if you're on the SEO or content side, it's almost like a startup mentality of like, we need to be agile and be ready to like make adjustments and not have to go through like tons of hoops and especially bigger corporations, right? So I think that is where we have to lean into is adaptability and also mindfulness, because if we don't practice mindfulness, I think a lot of us are going to stress and worry about what's going to happen instead of focusing on what's happening right now. If that makes sense.
Chris, if anybody's out there listening, they want to work with you. If they're interested in a job, I'm sure you're always hiring writers. How do they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I would say if anyone's interested in either speaking content, working with us, or even potentially working with us in a creative capacity, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. My handle is the.chris.reid. Or they can reach out to me via email, chris@stretchcreative.co, or visit our website, stretchcreative.co.
Awesome. Chris, thank you so much for the time today. Fascinating story. Appreciate the insights on AI and how to make it more efficient for your content needs. It's also super cool that you got second place in the baking show on 5 weeks prep.
Yeah,
It just kind of
I'll
shows you
send you the link to the
if you
show, my
mind
friend.
do it, you can do it, guys. That's super cool. Thanks again,
Yeah.
Chris.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, Shane. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.